Thank you, and I'm very pleased to recognize the chairman of the Middle East and South Asia Subcommittee, the gentleman from New York, Mr. Ackerman.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I don't think it's a secret that I've been a very active advocate of sanctions in Iran. For many years, I've thought it essential to force Iran to pay a price, some price, any price, for its regional subversion, its state sponsorship of terrorism, and most of all, its nuclear proliferation. In this last regard, however, I feel it may already be too late for sanctions. In April of last year, I warned that our thinking about the Iranian nuclear problem needed to change. I suggested then that, quote, options that years ago would have seemed reckless have now become essential leverage if we are going to be successful in peacefully getting Iran to back down. With Iranian proliferation on the horizon, what is feckless is in fact reckless. That's what I said a year ago. As have many others, I've supported the administration's efforts to engage Iran. In my travels through the Middle East and here in Washington, I've asked Israelis and numerous Arab leaders if they supported the President's approach to engage Iran. Every single intelligence chief, minister, king, prince, president, head of state responded exactly the same way. America's engagement is long overdue and absolutely essential. And then when I asked them if they thought it would work, to a man, they said, absolutely not. I don't think they're wrong either. Recent events in Iran are instructive. When confronted by a challenge, Iran's rulers responded like any other pack of thugs, with regime-sponsored violence and utter disregard for human life. And, it should be noted, the concerns and views of the rest of the world mattered to them not in the slightest. In short, with their backs against the wall, Iran's rulers didn't care who or how many got hurt. Unfortunately, these events don't bode well for the administration's effort. Whether or not bilateral discussions are going on right now or not, I don't know. But either way, I frankly have little hope that Iran's rulers will give up their nuclear ambitions in any case. What we've seen of late strongly suggests that Iran's rulers would gladly break the country in half in order to preserve their grip on power. And even, given what has happened in Iraq and what has not happened in North Korea, I suspect Iran's thug-ocracy sees nuclear arms as their ultimate insurance policy. All of this is to say that we need to start thinking again, not just about sanctions and not just about what constitutes so-called crippling sanctions, but whether there is any level of economic sanctions sufficient to compel a change in Iran's nuclear program. And as we consider this question vis-a-vis Iran, I would suggest we think seriously about the decade of truly comprehensive sanctions on Iraq, which ultimately failed to resolve concerns about weapons of mass destruction that didn't even exist. Does anyone think that the Ayatollah Khomeini is a nicer guy than Saddam Hussein? This is reality. Iran is marching swiftly towards either a bomb or a latent nuclear capability. This development is deeply destabilizing an already deeply unstable region. Successful proliferation by Iran will most likely destroy the NPT and the international norm against nuclear proliferation. If left unaddressed by the United States and the rest of the international community, as seems to be the case right now, Israel will have to either live under Iranian nuclear sword or act preemptively themselves. In April of last year, I concluded by saying, I'm not calling for another war. I want to prevent one. But we may have to go right up to the brink if to be considered serious and credible.
The time the gentleman has expired.
Iranian nuclear weapons unacceptable.
The gentleman from New York, Mr. Ackerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Engagement. I think I've seen the movie before. I would concede that I saw it in a different theater. But that doesn't disqualify me from thinking that I suspect that I can remember how it ends. If there is a chance that we could have engagement with Iran, with whom right now would we negotiate? I ask that question fervently believing that despite the fact that there may be some confusion over who comes out on top, I'd be shocked if I thought any of you would suggest that they've stopped their nuclear weapons program while that dynamic is happening? Who would you talk to if you were the president and made a phone call? Or would you not talk to anybody until some of the dust settles and it becomes clearer with that clock ticking within the alligator?
Personally, I'd wait for their phone call. I think that the ball is in their court.
Okay.
And that we shouldn't rush, and that we've shown the world that we're interested in engaging, and that...
So you would allow them to continue to develop their nuclear weapons program with the Israeli clock ticking at the same time?
I wouldn't be in any great rush to engage with them.
Okay. Dr. Maloney?
I think that's the reality. I'm sorry, Maloney and Milani, we often find ourselves conflated here, but I think that's where the administration is at this point. There have been a number of gestures that were made earlier in the year. The administration is prepared for a response, and I think rightfully so is going to play out this clock.
Dr.
Maloney? My sense is that the two clocks, the nuclear clock and the democratic clock, are interlinked. This regime cannot be relied on to abide by its words, even if it promises to stop its nuclear program. A regime that lies to
You've seen the movie, too.
I've seen the movie. But I would say that engaging with them creatively and wisely helps the democratic clock. We will not have a resolution of the nuclear program unless we have a democratic regime in Iran. Every policy, in my view, that tries to stop the nuclear program must have the democratic clock.
Okay. Dr. Sajapur?
I'm not a doctor yet, but I think there is a policy which reconciles these two goals of preventing Iran's or deterring Iran's nuclear ambitions, while at the same time, helping to facilitate the conditions for the Iranian people. But I would simply agree with what Patrick Clausen said, that the Obama administration has made tremendous efforts to reach out to Tehran. And the dust hasn't settled in Tehran, so we shouldn't reach out yet.
We're 0 for 4 on negotiating. Dr. Rubin?
If the Supreme Leader and the IRGC aren't prepared to talk on nuclear and terrorism issues, we need to start considering what our Plan Bs, Cs, and Ds
0 for 5. Professor Kittrey? Press your button.
The offer of dialogue is on the table. I don't think we should just sit back and wait. I think we should be squeezing the Iranians as time goes on in the ways I described.
0 for 5.5. In order for us to have any effect on the process of stopping a nuclear program, we've often talked about big carrots and big sticks, which I think the administration has referred to previously, and certainly the chairman has advocated in the past. The question is really the big sticks, which we've not implemented whatsoever. Should we be right now, as quickly as we can, ratcheting up critical sanctions in which we get as many international players involved?
Mr. Chairman, as big a problem as the stick has been that Khomeini thinks our carrot is poisoned. He thinks that, in fact, our objective is to overthrow his regime through a velvet revolution. And so, therefore, he is completely unconvinced that doing a deal on the nuclear issue is going to bring him any benefit whatsoever. He just thinks we're going to do something else.
If there were big sticks in effect, if we indeed were able to realize a rapid implementation of sanctions that had a more crushing impact on their economy, does not that help us?
Our problem is he thinks we're going to keep up those sanctions until he goes. He thinks that's our real objective, is to get rid of him and to get rid of his system. So he thinks the nuclear issue is just the latest ruse that we're using for our goal of a velvet revolution.
My question is, do not economic sanctions help the people in the street?
Iran is a rational actor. The regime makes cost-benefit calculations. It has reverse policy on very critical issues, including the decision to end the war after Khomeini invade against that for years. So
who would make that decision
change.
now? Who would make with everything going on? Who would make that decision now? Is there anybody able to make that decision?
The Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khamenei.
I don't think Khamenei is no longer in a position to make that decision. I think a clique of the Revolutionary Guards are now as much in charge of Iran's foreign policy as Khamenei is, and I think without their say, there won't happen. I think you have to remember there is something very unusual about the Iranian people. They are the only pro-American Muslim society. We need to keep that in mind.
Mr. Sajapur?
I think the most devastating blow to the Iranian economy would be a precipitous decline in oil prices. A $1 decline in oil prices is about $900 million lost annual revenue for Iran. And the country which can most effectively bring oil prices down in the near term is Saudi Arabia.
Almost.
If we're interested in diplomacy, coercion amplifies diplomacy.
The time of the gentleman has expired. And